everybody! Welcome back to TPR Live. Today we're going to be talking about sentence diagrams. Specifically, this is just going to be an introduction to sentence diagrams. There's a lot to consider when you're diagramming a sentence, and we're going to be talking about the basics today. So before we get started, as we always do, grab something to write with, something to write on, and we will get to our warm-up. For today, what you're going to do, or going to attempt to do, is identify each subject, verb, direct object, indirect object, and article in each of the 4 sentences that you're going to see in just a moment. If you don't know what they are, that's okay. Give it your best shot. And if you do, great. If you want to try to diagram them from the get-go to see how you are, you can go for that as well. And at the end of this presentation, I'm going to go back and review the answers and show the diagrams for each sentence. So let's take a look at the first sentence here. He painted a sunset. So you might want to write number 1 on your paper and write the full sentence just so that you have everything there, because once I move on from the screen, you won't be able to see it until the end. Number 2, Aiden admired the globe. Number 3, Jessica bought Ari a tablet. And the last one for our warm-up, number 4, the cactus grows. So I'll give you a few more seconds here to go ahead and copy down the sentences or take a picture, screenshot, whatever it is that you want to do to have them here. And again, you're going to find each part of speech in subject, verb, direct object, indirect object, and articles. Not all of them have all of those things, but some of them do. And let's go ahead and move into the lesson for today. So you might be wondering, why should I even care? And what is a sentence diagram? Well, the sentence diagram, it's just a visual representation of the words in a sentence. You're going to see a bunch of horizontal and vertical lines and words on top of the lines and underneath of the lines and sideways and diagonally. And what these things do is they show us what part of speech each thing is or what it's doing in the sentence. And they're very helpful. And they can be very intimidating. I can remember the very first time I saw a sentence diagram in 7th grade. I had no idea what it was, but when I learned how to do them, my grammar improved immensely. So it's definitely worth learning at least the basics of sentence diagrams so that you can start to organize the different parts of a sentence and better understand how different parts of speech function and work together to form sentences. So today, we're going to be looking at 3 sentence structures. The basic sentence, the subject verb. We're also going to look at subject verb object. And then the last one we're going to look at is subject verb object objects. And there are lots of other sentence structures, basic sentence structures of written English. That's another episode for another day. But for today, just these 3 basic ones. We're not going to be looking at complements. We're not going to be looking at adjectives and adverbs and all of those things, but they're definitely worth looking into after you've gotten some basics down. So let's talk about basic sentence structure. At the very least, a sentence is always going to have a subject and a predicate. Okay, so a simple subject is just a word, it's usually a noun or a pronoun, and it serves as the subject of the verb. It does the action. And if you didn't have any modifiers like adjectives, adverbs, or noun clauses or things, you would just have a simple subject. So we're only going to be focusing on that today just to keep our diagram simple. And the simple predicate is just the word or verbs that comprise the verb or verb phrase. Again, we're keeping it simple. So today, we're going to see subjects, verbs, and those other things you saw in the warm-up, articles, indirect objects, direct objects, and we're also going to see some prepositions. So if you're tuning in live, if you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat, and Shadna will be happy to post them to me, and I can answer them in real time. Now we've got that down, we've got some basics, we know what we're going to be doing today. So let's take a look at the most basic sentence structure. And that's just going to be the SV, or subject verb. It's exactly what it sounds like, a subject and a verb. So the shortest sentences can actually be one word. We'll see an example of that in a moment, but typically you just see a subject and verb. That would be intransitive because there's no object. I'm not getting into that today. But let's see an example of one of these very short sentences. She walks. Okay, super simple. You've got a pronoun, you've got a verb, it's in the present tense, no complicated tenses or things, just 2 words, that's it. So how do we diagram this? Well, you can start by drawing a horizontal line like this, and then slice that line with a vertical line that cuts through it. And then we're just going to put the elements of the sentence onto that line. So the first thing we have is she. She is going to go to the left. She is the subject. And then to the right of that line, we're going to put the word walks, which is our verb. And that's it. That's your very, very basic subject-verb form of diagramming a sentence. And we're going to build onto this as we go on. But let's look at a couple more examples of subject-verb. So let's consider the next sentence. Winston drives. All right, 2 words again, very simple. We have our vertical and our horizontal lines here. What do you think is going to go on the left? We're going to put Winston, our subject, and then to the right, we'll put drives, the verb. Okay, so I mentioned that sometimes a sentence can just be 1 word. For example, go. If I said go, that's a complete sentence. And I'm talking to someone, and to whom am I speaking in a sentence like that? Go. Or stop. Well, we can start by drawing a horizontal line and then slice it down the side with the vertical line, and we can put the word stop, but who or what is doing the stopping? Well, you probably guessed that it's you to whom I'm speaking, whoever's listening to me now. And the you is implied. So when you're diagramming a sentence that's in this imperative form, when you're giving a command or telling someone or someone's to do something, you would just put the word you as the implied subject. Okay, so that is our basic subject verb or implied subject verb sentence structure. So let's build onto that by taking a look at what a subject with a verb and then an object looks like. Okay, so in an example sentence, we have Raul bought flour. Not flowers, not the kind you smell, the kind that you bake with. So 3 words. Start with it simple here. Raul bought flour. We can draw our horizontal line, add that vertical line. We know what to do with the beginning part now, right? We know the subject. We know it's Raul's doing that action. Raul, subject, and then our verb, what is it that Raul did? Well, Raul bought. So we can just label that for ourselves, verb. And bought what? He bought flour. So that's a direct object. Bought what? Bought flour. So what we're going to do is draw another vertical line. Now notice how this line is not slicing all the way through the horizontal line. It's only on top of it. This is going to show that it's not the verb that's to the right of it. Instead, it's going to be the direct object, which in this case is flour. Okay, and you have a direct object when the object is receiving the action of the verb. I've talked about this in other videos, feel free to look at them. We're not going to get too much into direct objects today, but just so you know how to label them in your sentence diagrams, we'll look at a few more examples. Okay, and as you notice, I'm giving you the subject, verb, direct object here. When you're actually diagramming sentences, you're not going to write that because it's going to be understood without these arrows and words what each part of speech is and what function it's serving in the sentence. Okay, so next example here. Olga drove the car. So now we have a 4th word. We have Olga drove the car. And you can kind of follow along with me if you're watching live here. And we can start with our horizontal line, the vertical line that's cutting through. We know we're on the subject verb object page, so there's an object in here, so you can draw your second shorter vertical line. And then we can start labeling the pieces that we know. So what's the subject? Olga. Olga's doing the action. And what is the action that Olga did, does, or is doing? Olga drove. So we're going to put our verb here. And then what did she drive? Olga drove a car. But what do we do with the? And what is the? The is just an article. So you have three articles, a, an, and the. And they're really just describing, or really they're a form of adjective, to describe the car. We're not getting into any other types of adjectives today, just the articles to keep it simple. So what we do when we have an article is we draw a diagonal line beneath the thing it's describing and then put the word on that line. So here we have Olga drove the car. And that's how you properly diagram the sentence. Okay, so let's look at one more subject verb object situation. I saw an elephant. Okay, so this is similar to the last sentence that we saw. Now we have just a different article. So let's diagram it. We'll draw our little horizontal and vertical line situation. And then let's put our subject. I, the verb, saw, and now we have, what is it that I saw? I saw an elephant, so just the noun part of the direct object. And then we have the article an. I saw an elephant, and that's it. And as you start to build onto these basic sentence structures, you'll have adverbs and adjectives and maybe multiple subjects or multiple objects and all kinds of different things happening. Again, another subject for another day. But you can keep building onto these things. And it's pretty cool because it's almost like its own kind of language that's representing to you in the form of a diagram what everything is doing and what it means within the context of that given sentence. Okay, so if you have any questions, again, feel free to type them in. I'm going to go over our last type of sentence structure today, and that's subject, verb, object. So if you've only got a subject and a verb in one object, that's going to be a direct object. But when you have a second object, there's going to be an indirect object at play. And you're going to have the subject verb. What comes first could be the indirect or the direct object. They can swap places, and you're going to see in just a moment an example of how we can kind of say the same thing in different order with or without a certain word. So the first one here, we're going to build onto what we saw on the last slide. So before we had just Raoul bought flour. Now we have Raoul bought flour for the roux. Okay, so we've doubled the length of the sentence. We went from 3 words to 6 words, and we've already seen a the, so we know what to do with articles, but now we have a small word for, which is a preposition. So we can go ahead and start by drawing our horizontal and vertical lines, and then we can go from there. We have Raoul as a subject. Raoul bought, we already know that that's the verb, and we can label them again here for you. And then we'll draw our next vertical line, right? And from there, bought what? Bought flour. You've already seen this part. Direct object. So what do you think we need to do next? For the roux. For the roux. So we know we have a second object. So we have an indirect object in here. And we know that for is the preposition, the is an article. So that means that roux is going to be the indirect object. And what we want to do is go ahead and build on. So the for is our preposition. Roux is that indirect object. And then the is modifying the roux. So our article is going to go beneath it there. There's a lot going on here. Let's just take a moment to look at it. You already know the basics. Raoul bought flour, and then this little diagonal line with a horizontal line, and then another diagonal line underneath of it. Okay, so the indirect object, we have a note here just in case anyone needs to review. It's the thing or the person or someone or something who or which is receiving the direct object. So the roux, the flour is for the roux. The roux is getting the flour. All right, let's see another example here of a subject, verb, object, object. So we've got Olga again in a car, but this time Olga gave the car to her. All right. Draw it up. What we know so far, we'll add Olga, our subject, In this case, our verb is gave. Gave what? Olga gave car. We know something's modifying car. We have an article, right? We have the article the modifying car. So we can put that on this little diagonal line beneath the word car. And then to her. So notice that to in this case is our preposition. I didn't label everything because just want to kind of see it without all the arrows and words. But because of the direction of these lines and the placement of them, we know what each thing is doing. We know that to is a preposition, her. So she got the car. So in each of these cases that you've seen so far, you see subject, verb, direct object, and in these cases you see a preposition, an article, and an indirect object. Same thing here. Subject, verb, you have an article in front of the direct object, and then a preposition, indirect object. So we have direct object and then indirect object, but we can switch it up. So let's take a look at the next one. Olga gave her the car. Well, that's the same thing as saying Olga gave the car to her, it just has fewer words in the sentence. So we would diagram this in much the same way as we did the previous one here. So let's take a look at what that looks like. All right, so we'll keep everything that's the same. Olga gave, car, the. Except we don't have a to, right? We have a her, so what do? You draw that line, but can you put something there? That's the question. Well, a lot of times you'll see an X that's placed there as a placeholder if there's no preposition before the direct object. And then you would place a direct object on the horizontal line, just as you saw in the previous sentence. So these two diagrams are very similar. The only difference is that one has a preposition and one doesn't. And you might see sentence diagrams in which the X isn't there as a placeholder for the preposition. So it can be done either way. If you're doing them in school, do whatever way your teacher tells you to do. Okay, so those are three basic sentence structures that we're going over today. There are other basic sentence structures, but these are the three of today's sessions. So now that we've looked at this and we've built onto them, I'm going to give you some of your own sentences to try and diagram. So take a look here at the first one. The sun shines. Very basic, 3 words. We're going to start simple. And we're only going to do 3 sentences today because we got to go back to that warm up and review everything. So if you're following along here, we can go through it word by word. We have the. Well, what is the? What is it serving? What function is it serving in the sentence? There's an umbrella and a nice sun shining in that umbrella. The is the article. Okay, so the sun. What is sun? Sun is the subject. Sun is doing the action, and the action or verb in this sentence is going to be shines. Okay, now you know what everything is. Question is, how do you go ahead and diagram it? So take a moment to draw your diagram if you haven't already done so. And this is what you should have. The is going to be on the diagonal line underneath of sun. You're going to have that the horizontal line here, but the vertical line slicing through it, and then shines your verb to the right. And notice how the punctuation is not included in the sentence diagram, but the capitalization is maintained. So when you're doing that, typically you're going to be instructed to keep any capital letters capitalized, but don't worry about periods and commas and other punctuation marks. All right, couple more here. Number 2, Shelley saw the sun. Okay, so go ahead and start working on this diagram. You can start with the word Shelley. And what is Shelley's function? Shelley is a noun, and the function of Shelley in the sentence, lots of S's, I'll try not to get tongue-tied here. Shelley is the subject. And then the word saw is the verb. And thus the article. And sun is the direct object. So I've given you all the functions of the words in the sentence, and it's your turn to draw the diagram. So I'll give you a few moments here to sketch that up. And just keep in mind that every time you have more than 2 words, you don't always have a direct object or indirect object. Sometimes you'll have a prepositional phrase or a complement or other things that we're not going over today. So don't assume that any sentence with 3 or more words is automatically including an object, because that's not necessarily the case. All right, let's take a look at what this diagram looks like. And here we have our subject, Shelley, verb saw, and then the beneath the word sun, which is the article here, and the direct object. All right, last one. Neha brought the umbrella for Jasper. So this is longer. And you can probably break it down because we're keeping it simple today. So what's the subject in the sentence? Or what is doing the action? In this one, we have the first word happens to be the subject, Neha. And our next word, brought, what is that? It's the verb, it's doing the action. Brought what? Brought the umbrella. So thus the article. And umbrella is the direct object. And you see that we have 2 more words for Jasper. So ask yourself, okay, do I have an indirect object? Is someone getting the direct object? Yeah, Jasper is getting the umbrella. So Jasper is going to be the indirect object here, and for is a preposition. So we'll label everything. And now go ahead and take a stab at diagramming the sentence yourself. So your prepositional phrase, your indirect object is often in what we call a prepositional phrase. And prepositional phrases can be quite long and convoluted and wordy. And for those of you prepping for ACT, SAT, and other standardized tests, prepositions and the phrases that they're contained within can get really long and wordy and throw you off when you're determining which verb to choose and so on. So when you learn your sentence diagrams, that'll help you sort of conceptualize and think about how everything's working together. You're not going to draw a sentence diagram on a standardized test because you don't have time for that. But if you work on them in your free time, it'll help you better understand how everything is functioning together. On test day, and you'll be able to quickly think about what's doing what and where and realize what your subject is, what your verb is, and so on and so forth. All right, so give you enough time here to hopefully make an attempt at drawing this diagram. And this is what it's going to look like. Our subject to the left of the first vertical line, Neha, brought the verb, umbrella to the right of that second vertical line, the is beneath umbrella, and for Jasper. All right, so those are those last 3 here. And if anyone has questions before or during the cool down, which is the final iteration of the warm-up, feel free to type them in. So we're going to see those 4 sentences that we saw at the very beginning yet again. And remember, you were tasked with determining what function each word in these sentences served. So take a look at your paper that you have or whatever you wrote on. Go ahead and grab it if you haven't done so already. And first word, he, is the subject. The next word, painted, is the verb. Third word, a, is an article. And then the last word, sunset, direct object. He painted what? He painted a subject. A sunset. That's our direct object. Okay, and what does that look like? It's a sentence diagram for anyone who took the challenge. This is what that is going to look like. Okay, number 2. Aiden admired the globe. So Aiden is your subject. Admired is the verb. The is an article. And then finally, admired what? Admired the globe. So globe is going to be the direct object. And in sentence diagram form, this is what it's going to look like. Aiden admired the globe. Okay, last 2. Jessica bought Ari a tablet. So our subject, Jessica, bought is the verb. And we've got a lot of words there, being as we've only done subject verb object, and subject verb object object. You can probably anticipate that you've got 2 objects here. But you've got to figure out which is the direct and which is the indirect. So Jessica bought what? She bought a tablet. So tablet is going to be the direct object. And who or whom was that tablet for? For whom was it for? It was for Ari. So that's the indirect object. So Ari is the indirect, A is the article, and tablet is the direct object. And that would look like this. And again, you have the X as a placeholder because we could also say Jessica bought a tablet for Ari. It's the same thing as saying Jessica bought Ari a tablet. If that were the case, the for Ari at the end, we would just make this X here would be the word for. And then lastly, number 4, the cactus grows. We'll finish up with the simple one. The cactus grows. So we have an article, the subject is cactus, and then a verb, grows. Super simple to sketch this one out. The only complicated thing would be that we have the article the needs to go beneath the cactus, the word cactus. All right, so if nobody has any questions, I'm going to wrap up for today, but hopefully this helped you better understand how we can work with subjects and verbs and indirect objects, direct objects, articles and prepositions, and I encourage you to continue building onto your knowledge of sentence diagrams and just doing this with more complex ideas so that you can continue to better understand them. And this will even help your standardized test scores. It'll help with your writing and everything in the grammar world. So good luck with everything, and I'll see everyone next time.